Tonight, a seismic Supreme Court decision has reverberated across the globe, sending shockwaves through governments, markets, and households alike. The world is watching as the highest court in the United States delivers a verdict with far-reaching consequences. In a historic 6-3 ruling, the court struck down the Trump-era tariffs, dismantling a key pillar of the America First economic agenda. These tariffs, once hailed as a bold move to protect American industries, have now been deemed unconstitutional, marking a dramatic shift in U.S. trade policy. This verdict challenges the limits of presidential power and reshapes the future of global commerce. By overturning these tariffs, the court has not only altered the economic landscape but also set a precedent for how far executive authority can reach in matters of international trade. Financial markets reacted instantly, with some sectors soaring and others bracing for impact. Investors scrambled to adjust their portfolios, while economists began recalculating forecasts for growth, inflation, and employment. For years, these tariffs sparked fierce debate. Supporters claimed they protected American jobs and revitalized struggling industries, while critics warned of higher costs for consumers, strained international relationships, and the risk of global retaliation. The decision has reignited these debates, as workers and business owners across the country wonder what comes next. Now the court has declared the executive branch overstepped its authority, reaffirming Congress's constitutional control over trade and taxation. This ruling reasserts the balance of power between the branches of government, reminding the nation that no single office holds unchecked authority. The implications are immense, potentially redrawing the boundaries of executive action for years to come. Legal scholars are already debating how this decision will influence future presidents and the scope of their power. How will this affect the U.S. economy, our relationship with China, and the political landscape in Washington? Allies and rivals alike are recalibrating their strategies as the world adapts to a new era in American trade policy. Tonight, we break down the legal reasoning, hear from those affected, and analyze the fallout of a decision that touches us all. From the halls of power to the homes of everyday Americans, the impact of this ruling will be felt for years to come. To truly understand today's Supreme Court ruling and its far-reaching implications, we need to take a step back and examine the roots of the controversy. The story begins decades ago, but its impact is very much alive in our current economic and political landscape. Let's revisit the origins of Section 232, a law that has shaped the way America approaches trade and national security for generations. In 2018, President Donald Trump invoked Section 232 of the 1962 Trade Expansion Act. This Cold War-era law was originally designed to give the president authority to impose tariffs or other trade restrictions if imports were found to threaten national security. For decades, it was rarely used, seen as a last resort in extraordinary circumstances. But under Trump, Section 232 was thrust into the spotlight. It became a cornerstone of his administration's economic agenda, with sweeping tariffs imposed on imported steel and aluminum. The move was unprecedented in its scale and ambition. The administration argued that a flood of cheap imports was undermining America's industrial base, putting critical industries, and by extension, national security, at risk. They claimed that without strong domestic production, the U.S. could be vulnerable in times of crisis. The result was a dramatic imposition of tariffs, 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum, affecting a wide range of products and industries across the country. These tariffs didn't just target America's rivals, they hit close allies as well, including Canada, Mexico, and the European Union. The move sparked outrage abroad and ignited a global trade war, with countries retaliating against U.S. exports. The policy soon expanded beyond steel and aluminum. Using a different law, Section 301, the Trump administration slapped tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, escalating tensions with the world's second-largest economy. China responded in kind, targeting key American exports, especially agricultural products like soybeans. This retaliation hit American farmers hard, cutting off access to vital overseas markets and driving down prices. The ripple effects were felt throughout the U.S. economy. Manufacturers faced soaring costs for raw materials, farmers struggled with lost export opportunities, and everyday consumers saw prices rise on a range of goods. While some domestic producers, especially in the steel industry, celebrated the protection and new business, the benefits were uneven. Many other sectors suffered, and the broader economy faced uncertainty. The sweeping use of tariffs fueled a fierce national debate. Business leaders, economists, and politicians clashed over whether the policy was helping or hurting America, and whether the president had too much power over trade. The administration's broad use of national security as a justification for tariffs set the stage for a major legal challenge. Critics argued that the law was being stretched far beyond its original intent. The economic disruption, combined with the expansive interpretation of executive power, ultimately led to a showdown in the Supreme Court. The stakes were high, not just for trade, but for the balance of power in American government. At the heart of the case was a fundamental question: who truly controls U.S. trade policy, the president or Congress? The answer would have lasting consequences for the nation's economy and its role in the world. That pivotal question, and the future of American trade authority, would soon be decided by the nation's highest court. The legal fight against the tariffs was a marathon, not a sprint. What began as a policy dispute quickly escalated into a complex legal battle, stretching over months and involving countless hours of preparation, argument, and anticipation. Each step forward in the courts brought new challenges and setbacks, testing the resolve of everyone involved. American manufacturers and trade groups argued the tariffs were an unconstitutional tax, making them less competitive and hurting consumers. They pointed to rising costs for raw materials, layoffs on factory floors, and higher prices at the checkout counter. For many businesses, these tariffs threatened their very survival, while ordinary Americans felt the impact in their wallets. Their core claim was simple but powerful. Section 232, as used, gave the president unchecked power, authority the Constitution reserves for Congress. They argued that allowing one person to impose sweeping economic measures without congressional approval undermined the very foundation of American democracy. The government countered that national security decisions deserved broad executive deference. They insisted that the president must have the flexibility to act swiftly in the face of threats, and that the courts should not second-guess these sensitive judgments. Lower courts mostly sided with the government, but the challengers persisted, warning of dangerous precedent. They feared that if left unchecked, this power could be used in ways Congress never intended, setting a precedent that could reshape the balance of power for generations. With support from legal scholars and business groups, the case finally reached the Supreme Court. The stakes had grown beyond tariffs, touching on fundamental questions about the separation of powers and the limits of executive authority. The justices faced a fundamental question: where does Congress's power end and the president's begin on trade and national security? Their decision would not only resolve this case, but also set a standard for future conflicts between the branches of government. The answer would have sweeping consequences for the balance of power in Washington. It would shape how future presidents and lawmakers approach issues of trade, security, and the Constitution itself. The stage was set for a historic decision, one that would echo through the halls of government and into the lives of every American. The nation held its breath as the Supreme Court released its opinion. The 6-3 majority, led by Chief Justice Roberts, focused on the Constitution, not the wisdom of tariffs. The court ruled Section 232, as applied, lacked a clear principle to guide the president, making it an unconstitutional delegation of Congress's power. Roberts wrote, "The authority to tax and regulate foreign commerce is not a blank check." The majority's coalition crossed ideological lines, signaling deep concern about unchecked executive power. In dissent, Justice Alito argued Congress had every right to delegate this authority, and national security was the president's domain. The ruling reasserted Congress's central role in trade policy. The majority opinion drew a bright line for future presidents. The problem wasn't delegation itself, but the lack of clear limits. National security had become a catch-all for economic protectionism. The court noted that Section 232 was rarely used for decades, but the 2018 tariffs applied it globally, even to close allies. The ruling declared, "A law that lets the president impose tariffs on any product, from any country, for any reason, is not a law with an intelligible principle." Section 232 isn't struck down, but it's unenforceable until Congress defines national security more narrowly. The ball is now in Congress's court to reclaim its authority. This decision will hit home for millions of Americans. With tariffs nullified, businesses relying on imported steel, aluminum, and Chinese goods will see costs drop. Economists predict lower prices for cars, appliances, and electronics. Welcome relief for consumers. Dr. Evelyn Reed estimates the tariffs cost households over $1,000 a year. Their removal should ease that burden. But not everyone wins. U.S. steel and aluminum producers warn of layoffs and plant closures as cheaper imports return. The United Steelworkers call the ruling a devastating blow. Meanwhile, American farmers and exporters could regain lost markets as retaliatory tariffs are lifted. The transition will create new winners and losers as the global trade map is redrawn. The economic landscape is shifting, fast. The Supreme Court's ruling has reignited fierce debate in Washington. Some lawmakers hail it as a victory for constitutional order and free trade, eager to repair alliances and restore congressional authority. Senate Majority Leader Schumer calls it a win for consumers, workers, and the rule of law. Others, including former President Trump, denounced the decision as a betrayal of American workers, demanding strong executive action against unfair trade. Congress now faces a high-stakes challenge: rewrite the law to define national security and trade, or risk further division. The coming legislative battle will force every member to take a stand on trade, protectionism, and presidential power. The outcome will shape U.S. economic policy for years. The stakes couldn't be higher. The world is watching and reacting. In Brussels, EU officials welcomed the ruling, eager to restore normal trade and repair transatlantic ties. Allies like Japan, South Korea, and Canada see hope for a more stable, rules-based relationship. China's response is cautious, urging the U.S. to lift all illegitimate tariffs, but remaining wary after years of trade conflict. The ruling signals uncertainty for global investors and governments, who now await Congress's next move. Will the U.S. embrace free trade or craft new protectionist tools? The world is waiting to see if this is a turning point, or just a pause in America's trade battles. Tonight's decision is a powerful reaffirmation of American democracy. The Supreme Court has reminded us, no branch, not even the presidency, holds absolute power. The authority to make laws and levy taxes belongs to Congress. The debate over trade now returns to its rightful place, Capitol Hill. Lawmakers must finally confront the tough questions of balancing free trade, domestic industry, and global competition. The choices they make will shape the economy and our place in the world for a generation. As citizens, our engagement matters more than ever. The court has done its job. Now, democracy's messy work begins. The story of these tariffs is a lesson in the resilience of our system, and a reminder that the Constitution endures.